Yo, what's up? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to another story mix. Today we got a handful of stories where ego death occurred. Ego death is exactly what it sounds like. Your ego, everything you know to be about you and your life, the fact that you're even a human being, having an experience, slips from your conscious awareness as if you died almost. Often this is driven by a strong hallucinogenic state that leaves the users on the ground with eyes closed, but you'll see how it varies. And joining me again to read some stories is Ananka.
What's up, everybody? It is Ananka back once again for another collab. I know y'all love to see it. And as you already know, the theme for this video is going to be ego death.
Make sure you check out his channel. And before we get into this, I do want to know that these stories are taken from various points in time, so the quality will vary. But I'm sure you'll enjoy these. Let me know what you guys want to see next. Make sure to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's dive right into this. My first trip ever. Date: May 21st, 2016. Time of dosage: 5:30 p.m. Gender: male. Weight: 70 kilograms / 155 pounds. Age: 17. Setting: at my house. Report. Context: I had gotten interested in psychedelics, so I ordered some morning glory seeds. Never having done anything like this before, I did not know what to expect. Dinner time. I ate spaghetti for dinner, and I decided to take the seeds. It was roughly 5:30, and it seemed like a good time. The packet had 1,500 seeds in it, so I poured roughly half of the seeds out in my hand. I smelled them, and it was a very natural, earthy smell. I decided to take the seeds in 2 mouthfuls, since all of the seeds at once would be too much. I put half the seeds in my mouth and began chewing. The taste wasn't that bad. It became difficult to swallow, so I quickly got a cup of lemonade and got the seeds down pretty quickly. I put the second amount of seeds in my mouth. It was harder to get them down this time, even with lemonade. I gagged, but I got them down. 30 minutes in. I felt very weak and lay down on the couch. I had read online that morning glory seeds cause nausea, and I was not determined to throw up. The nausea wasn't too bad at this point. Mostly just a feeling of overwhelming weakness was present. I was listening to music, but I put down my computer and just laid there for the come up. 1 hour in. After laying on the couch for a while, the nausea went away. I began to notice a very pleasant sensation throughout my body. It was a mellow stoning feeling. Very nice indeed. I got excited and walked to my room and put my bed covers over my face so I could see if there were any closed-eye visuals. The first thing I saw was a dimly lit grid of lines with small shapes moving between the squares in the grid. I just laid in my bed for about 20 minutes and watched that grid. 1 hour and 30 minutes in. I was feeling very euphoric at this point, and I remember my mom saying that she was going to the store. She didn't know I had taken anything. I said okay, and I went on the back porch and laid on the couch. I specifically remember how beautiful the trees looked, swaying in the wind. After a bit of laying there, I went outside and laid in the grass. It felt like the grass was slowly eating me, and I didn't mind. I looked up at the trees above me, laughing like crazy and thinking a lot of thoughts about the universe. I have no idea how long I was laying out there, but eventually I went back inside the porch. I began to notice some tracers when I moved my iPod too quickly. Later. At this point, I began to lose track of time. My mom came home and she called my name, but I couldn't get up off the couch on the porch. The euphoria was too strong for me to even think about moving. But then, I thought she might get really scared if she didn't see me anywhere in the house, so I got up. Gravity seemed to be much heavier as I made my way inside. I don't remember what she got at the store, but she didn't seem to notice I was on anything. I went back to my room and closed my eyes. I saw a lot of different settings and landscapes. I don't remember that much from the landscapes, except ancient Egyptians and pyramids, along with some cryptic bursts of thought. About 4 hours in. It's dark outside at this point, and I'm sitting in the TV room on the couch. I can't remember if the TV was on or not, but either way, it doesn't matter because staring at the floor was a lot more entertaining. It was drifting, flowing, like an ocean. I just couldn't stop staring at it. I got up and looked in the mirror. My eyes were more dilated than I have ever seen them, and everything looked extremely crisp and detailed. I sat back down on the couch and texted my friends. I tried explaining to them that I was tripping, but I ended up just typing random things about the universe. They were very confused. I noticed that the tracers were increasing in their intensity, as moving the text up or down would make solid tracers. About 4 hours, 30 minutes in, I began to enter ego death. The rapid thoughts that I had been having up to this point began to slow down until I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just there, existing. I don't remember anything from the ego death. I have no idea how long I was gone, but when I came back, I didn't even realize what had happened. When I came back, I was still holding my can of Coca-Cola. I put the can of Coke on the table next to the couch. I just continued sitting there for a while. I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom walked by and got concerned because I looked like a rag doll. She asked me if I was okay, and I said yes. I knew that she looked familiar, and that my house looked familiar, but that's about all I knew. I put my hand on my chest, and I couldn't feel a heartbeat. I also couldn't tell if I was breathing or not. Normally this would have concerned me, but it didn't this time. I felt like I knew the purpose behind why I wasn't able to breathe, and that was good enough for me. I felt like I knew the answers to every question in the world without even thinking about it. I just had the answers as they presented themselves from an unknown place in my head. Maybe 5 hours and 30 minutes in, I got the wonderful idea of listening to music on my computer. I hadn't listened to music up to this point, except for the come up. It took a moment to remember the password to my computer, but I eventually got it. I picked out a song with a lot of bass and put the equalizer to max bass. Then I put my earbuds in and started the song. This was one of the most intense things I've ever experienced. It felt like the song was ripping my consciousness out of my body. The visuals really started picking up. The carpet was flowing more than ever. And then I looked at the front door. It was morphing like it was dancing to the song. I glanced at my hand and my skin was flowing. The shadows on my hand were melting down my wrist. After a little bit of staring at my hand, I realized that my hand was many different geometric shapes. It was mostly three-dimensional triangles and trapezoids, seamlessly interconnecting with each other as they moved. My mom went to the front door to go out to smoke a cigarette, and the door was flowing as she opened it and closed it. After listening to music, I started feeling really sick to my stomach, so I went to the other room and laid on that couch. I laid there for a good while. I might have even fallen asleep there, but I can't remember. If I did fall asleep, it was definitely a light sleep. I eventually decided to go to bed. I got in bed and laid in the dark while watching the geometry. I tried going to sleep for a while, but it didn't work. Eventually, I fell asleep. 2 a.m. I woke up from sleep extremely quickly and shot straight up out of bed and immediately puked on the floor. I could have found something to puke on, but it didn't even cross my mind because I had just woken up. So now there's a pile of thrown up spaghetti and seeds on my floor. I tried my best to clean it up, but it was hard to get on my hands to work. The body load was pretty heavy still, and I really couldn't focus on a task. The puke began drifting, and I laughed a little bit. I gave up trying to clean it and put a towel over it to hide it. I still felt sick and laid on the floor. I threw up again, this time on the towel. I decided that I would never take morning glories again. I got back in bed and went to sleep once more. 9 a.m. I woke up pretty early and felt amazingly rejuvenated. Everything looked and felt so crisp and vibrant. I didn't really feel sick anymore. I explained to my friends that I was tripping last night and strained that out. The rejuvenation lasted about a month. Submitted by Cannabis Entity.
The first trip report I have for you is on 2C-B/nitrous oxide. The title of this trip report is Experiencing Ego Death for the First Time, and was submitted to ETHEREUM in 2021 by the user Alexis Dobler. With all that being said, let our story begin. Mindset/setting. 4 good friends, 11 p.m. at night in one of our share house living rooms. Great vibes, everyone relaxed, music playing, and preparations made. Made sure I was sitting comfortably with 2 whippets cracked into a balloon. Dosage/timing. 25 milligrams of 2C-B around an hour previous. Would not say I was really experiencing much of a trip by the time I did the nangs. However, maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Description/experience. I sat on the beanbag, with my friend next to me on the floor sitting back against the sofa. He settled himself on the floor. We both held 2 full balloons of nitrous oxide in our hands. You ready? I asked my friend, who was timing us to make sure we didn't hold our breath for too long. She was like, yeah, of course. My friend next to me reached over to the phone connected to the speaker, turning up the volume. A trance classic we both loved. We said 3, 2, 1, and began to breathe. As the nang began to overtake me, I noticed the familiar feeling of dissociation. Confident in the safety of my friend who was timing us, I kept going when before I had stopped, kept inhaling from the balloon. At some point, I reached the end. My ego died. Every model I had of perception was stripped away, from complex to simple. And the last to go were time and space. And the very last to go was the base awareness of self. You don't truly understand how important the model of time and space is to your perception until it goes and you experience eternity. Likewise, space and the experience of being everything and nothing. And finally, the quote-unquote experience of not existing. Then I started to come back, and it was the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life. As every model of reality was remembered or regained, perception of self, perception of time, perception of space, was accompanied by some kind of memory of what the stage below felt like. From the perspective of someone who now had that model, the idea of not having was unthinkable. I think owing to the nature of the drug that induced this, I regained my models very quickly, came back to my senses, to the point where I could function and speak and talk almost as soon as I opened my eyes. But like an asymptotic curve, each model took longer to be regained and less impactful as they became more complex and derived. Like vague cognition of plans I had made with someone in the next week, or slight guilt that I had eaten too much cake that afternoon. I realized, with some accompanying fear, that in fact, I was never going to stop coming out of the nang, in that this process of model forming was essential to what it meant to be conscious, nang or not. I was immediately drawn to ideas of emergent complexity, of the thought and now understanding of the fact that I was composed entirely of atoms with no concept of self. Yet, through some patterning of these atoms, I ostensibly was conscious, and that consciousness must be an experience continuum. The experience was incredibly scary. I suspect that it is and will be incredibly beneficial as I process things. Not that I would, if possible, repeat it for any sum of money. I'll do it again when my physical body dies, and I'll be doped on DMT and enjoy it. I'm as surprised as the next person that this happened on a 2-canister balloon. Perhaps the 2C-B had something or a lot to do with it. I'm very grateful that I happen to have the right tools to deal with it emotionally. Recent acid trips and meditation has taught me the value of approaching some things with feeling and not thinking. Having the wisdom to recognize when a problem can be dealt with logic and a solution can be found if mulled over, and when a problem is just present with no clear solution and acceptance of it. Feeling it, but not thinking it, is often the solution itself. What an ego death means to myself or anyone is one of these problems. To be talked quietly with close friends, reflected on in diaries, and just to be with. I suspect it will take more years than I will live to fully comprehend it.
Vision of the Nagual. A number of years ago, I had a trip on Salvia Divinorum that I was not likely to forget. I had been researching Salvia for some while. It is an entheogen originally used by the Mazatec Indians of Oaxaca, Mexico, and healing and divination. Salvia is a member of the sage family and is often loosely translated as diviner sage or seer sage. The main psychoactive ingredient is a diterpenoid called salvinorin A, which is a potent K-opioid and D2 receptor agonist. Because of the legal status of this psychoactive substance, Salvia Divinorum is legal in the UK and can be purchased from head shops. I bought an extract of salvia, which was described as times 50 strength. This was an elixir produced through the process of adding salvinorin A to the crushed leaf of the plant, making available something 50 times the strength of the leaf. I sat down with a friend one night, prepared to ingest this times 50 extract. It is smoked in a bong or a pipe, and for my trip, I borrowed a bubble bong, which looks something like this. I warned my friend that it might be a strong trip as he was intending to have a go as well. I filled the bowl of the bong with the extract, lit it, and drew back on the pipe. I never even got to finish the bowl. As soon as the smoke entered my lungs, the Salvia Divinorum kicked in and took hold. I blacked out immediately. When I came to, I lunged and stood up. I was then standing over my friend, staring at him wildly. At first I didn't recognize him, and then gradually his name returned to me. The problem was, though, I had no idea who I was. Everything had gone. My name, my identity, everything about me had dissolved. I was stood there staring at him. I vocalized all this, to his great amusement. Eventually, my identity began to return, and I started coming back to consciousness, at which point I felt a sharp pain in my thumb. I was still holding onto the smoldering bowl of the pipe. I lunged again, falling over on the other side of the room, while screaming in agony, with the water and the contents of the burning bong spilling on the carpet. It took me a little while to recover. It had been an intense experience, but only lasted a quarter of an hour. After the experience had worn off sufficiently, I started discussing what had happened. It was a surprising event, to actually lose my name, and with it, my identity. It was horrifying. The trip felt like everything had been stripped away from me, along with my internal dialogue. The description of who I was simply was not there. Don Juan in the books of Castaneda describes how our world and perceptions are created and upheld by an internal dialogue. He also considered everything in our world to have a proper name. The naming of things was intrinsic to upholding and maintaining this internal dialogue. So, for me, when my name was no longer available, neither was my identity. When we are in the state of the unborn, we are without identity. When we enter the world, we come with a gender. The first thing we are given is our name. As life progresses, we are then subsequently given attributes as our roles develop. The imprinting continues all our life, and we become enmeshed in our world, indivisible from it. The stripping away that the Salvia experience had on me was returning me to this original state. This place of innocence was fundamentally without need for identity or labeling of any kind. For a brief moment, I was in the place of pure consciousness and being. Considering its legality, Salvia Divinorum is a powerful drug and should be treated with respect. Having said that, the plant showed me something of the truth about the nature of reality and about the nature of myself.
Alright, everybody. The second trip report I have for you is going to be on ketamine. The title of this trip report is So That's What Death Feels Like, and was submitted to ETHEREUM in 2010 by the user Double D. With all that being said, let our story begin. Now, being a fairly logical person, I should perhaps have realized that submitting to a challenge and putting a rolled up banknote in a fairly large bag of ketamine and proceeding to take a huge deep breath in through my nose was not the best of ideas. However, not to be outdone by my friend and already on pills, I thought, hey, you only live once. I never truly knew the meaning of that expression up to today. So judging by the amounts left in the bag by the time I collapsed back onto the sofa and rolled into a ball, my friends calculated I had done well over a gram. Just to be sure, however, moments before I lost my sanity, I took another small whiff through the other nostril, at which point the back of my head started to throb. What happened next would be imprinted on my brain for the rest of eternity. I saw my friend stood in front of me, holding one thumb up to see if I was okay, obviously realizing that verbal communication with me was going to be difficult for a short while. I was about to nod when the image in front of me split into 4 sections, as if a cross was drawn in my line of vision, dissecting my view into 4 quarters. These then proceeded to individually turn in a 90-degree motion and shatter, much like glass. Behind them was complete blackness. The blackness slowly became lighter and lighter, and I felt as if I was going down a slide made from cloud. After sliding down this cloudy hellhole for a short while, I came to an abrupt stop, and to my left was my friend's face, attached to a puppet-looking angel. His face is what scared me most. I could tell from his evil smile where I was going. He waved as I felt myself jerking forward through a reddy brown vortex type thing. Now try to bear in mind the relationship between what I was seeing and what I had just done. I was well aware that I had taken far too much ketamine, and then suddenly I'm in a very convincing heaven and hell scenario. Was I dead? This time I'd finally broken my limit. No going back now. I had well and truly fucked it this time. Luckily for me, I wasn't dead. But I won't even speak about the weird fucked up shit I saw when I finally got through to the other side of the vortex. All in all, it was an experience, I guess. One which I won't hastily retry. The intense part of actually not knowing where I was lasted for about an hour and a half, or maybe 2 hours. To me, it felt like a much shorter time, I think. The thing I found most interesting and highly amusing is the coming back to reality. It's almost as if I was transgressing various different planes of fuckedness, while slowly each one making slightly more sense and having less weird shizzle in it. Until at some point I ended up reaching the final plane. Us here now. See ya, Ed.
A powerful night. So this story took place around August 14th at 10 p.m. and I was 16 years old. I had got my hands on an eighth of psilocybin mushrooms from a friend. This was my third time tripping on them, and the last two experiences were in the last 3 weeks, and I only ate about 2.5 to 3 grams the last times. I was uneducated, not knowing to take breaks in between, therefore I had this very strong experience. I sat in my bed and started eating them and downed any extra of the little pieces at the bottom of the bag. As I waited, I definitely felt nervous, as I usually did the last 2 times. I put on some meditation music and waited. It took a good hour and a half, I believe, and my parents and siblings were off to sleep. As I felt the come up, my body felt incredibly light as I was becoming weightless. Things started looking clearer almost, in a sense, and the colors were vibrant. I had a drawing on my wall of an eye, and the eyelashes were moving back and forth very fluidly. My walls were painted in a beige color, and it popped out looking very yellow for some reason. While looking down in my bed, all the little wrinkles in the covers looked like little mountains and hills. I saw tiny little stick-looking figures walking up with bags dragging behind them. At this point I was feeling odd and quickly took out my earbuds and turned off the music. I started looking around my room, and my fan was sounding different, as if it were changing pitches and sound low and high. The hallucinations started getting really vivid at this point. My door started turning and warping into itself. I haven't experienced really strong hallucinations yet from my past 2 experiences. I was feeling very uneasy because I couldn't keep my eyesight still. Things wouldn't stop moving no matter if I tried to close my eyes or not. I was trying to resist it when I shouldn't have, and for some reason I remember taking my clothes off besides my boxers only. I got up and felt very heavy, and it was kinda hard to walk. I walked over to my mirror and just stared at myself. The first thing I noticed was how huge my pupils were, and then I could start seeing all the pores in my face. This was very cool but scary at the same time. As I started looking longer, I began to see my face age and then get younger again. This was the most vivid hallucination I will always remember. My face was starting to make almost copies of themselves, then swirl into each other, and it spanned back outwards. It felt like I was looking at the mirror for a long time, but it probably wasn't. I was feeling very nauseous, so I tried to throw up in the bathroom, but nothing came out. I went back in my room and just sat in my bed silently. At this point, I couldn't think that well. I simply just wanted to sleep and get this over with, but there was nothing I can do. I turned my light off and laid down. This was when the really scary part started happening. I had this headphone stand that always had a blue light on, and it was reflecting onto the ceiling fan. I looked at it and it seemed like it was spinning really fast. I had thought it was a mushroom cap spinning in mid-air almost like a flying saucer. I remember almost wanting to cry because how much things were moving. I was afraid I would be stuck in this state forever. Then, within seconds, I felt nothing but blankness. It was very indescribable. I had an ego death. I didn't know who I was. I could no longer feel my body, my bed, or anything, but just see the blue light and darkness. I saw myself sitting at the end of a broken bridge with black thick mist around me, then quickly saw myself sitting in my bed, experiencing this but from third person. I started crying at this point, thinking I have died and that I was watching myself from an almost ghost-like state. I felt my jaw moving by itself as if my body was trying to talk, but no words were coming out. I laid back and let this all happen. I started feeling connected with the air, the sounds, the things I saw. I felt one and all. Shortly after I regained movement and feeling, I forced myself to get up and turn on the light. I sat back in my bed and cried again. I was just so in awe of what happened, I couldn't understand it at the time nor think. I tried to watch some YouTube to see if it will calm me down, but everyone's voices, no matter what channel I was watching, were sounding very low-pitched and dark. So I then looked at Facebook, but that made me scared as well when I would see pictures of people thinking they were staring at me. After this, it was fuzzy, and I remember the light being off somehow, and I was just lying there coming down. I fell asleep and awoke the next morning feeling insanely refreshed, like as if I was almost reborn. I sat up and looked around my room with an insane amount of appreciation for everything. The first thing I immediately thought of was to tell my parents, but I couldn't because I would be in trouble if they knew. But I hugged them both in the morning, which I don't do often, and talked to them more than usual. I remember starting my first day of school the next morning, which now that I think back, it was a horrible idea to eat shrooms before that day. I called my friend who had given me them, and found out he gave me 4.5 grams, but without telling me, thinking I was going to split them for different times. He was trying to be nice by giving me the extra gram, and so it made more sense as to why I had such a strong experience that night. It's now been 9 months and things are going great. I have a better, positive outlook on life. When I am older, I will definitely try them again.